Hey Scholars, today we're going to continue talking about the different states of matter, but we're specifically going to focus on water and the different states of water, and we're going to connect this to something called the water cycle and start to understand how the sun is a source of heat for planet Earth and how the sun affects our water cycle. So our I can statement for today is I can explain the sun's role in the water cycle. So you'll need your notes and a pencil, and once you're ready, we'll get started. Alright, so this is a review from last time where we were saying that heating and cooling can cause matter to change state. So as we apply heat, we'll notice solids can change into liquids and liquids can change into gases. On the reverse, if we apply cooler temperatures to a gas, it can transform to a liquid, and those cool temperatures on a liquid can change it to a solid. And so, like I said, today we're focusing on water and water in its three states. So these are all probably things we've seen before, right? If we're thinking about solid water, water in its solid form is going to be ice. We can add that to our notes. So solid is going to be ice. Water in its liquid form is just going to be liquid water, like what you drink. And then finally, water vapor or steam is water in its gas form or gas state. And water is unique because it's the only substance on Earth that exists in all three states of matter naturally. So just on its own, water can exist in three different states. It's the only substance on Earth that does that. And so, like I said, we're going to connect this to something called the water cycle. Before we do that, we're going to think about the sun. So what is the sun's role in the water cycle? As we start to talk about water changing from ice to water vapor or steam, we need to know what is our heat source going to be. So to go from solid to liquid or liquid to gas, we know we need to add heat. And so on planet Earth, our natural heat source is the sun. The sun gives us heat and light, and the sun is the major source of energy that's going to move water from form to form or state to state through these different states of matter and in the water cycle. So a little background about the water cycle. When we're talking about the water cycle, we're thinking about this image right here. So water on planet Earth is constantly moving in a cycle, or think about a cycle as a circle. It's never ending. Water is always changing state. So let's start up here with condensation and precipitation. So our clouds up in the sky are actually made of water, and we're going to talk more about that this week as well. And so once our clouds get really, really full of water droplets, that's when we have precipitation, what we might know as rain or snow or sleet, the different types of precipitation that come from the sky. That's going to come down to the Earth's surface, and that water either soaks into the earth, or maybe it pools up in puddles or lakes or streams or in the ocean. And again, thinking about the sun and the sun's role, the sun is going to heat up the Earth's surface or the ocean and cause evaporation, which is when our liquid water starts to turn back into the gas form of water or water vapor. And we'll talk about more about this one later this week, later today, but this is when we have water also evaporating from our plants, from the leaves of our plants. And so through evaporation and transpiration, water vapor rises up into the atmosphere, and that water starts to collect again in clouds. And so again, it's going to continue in a cycle. Whereas the clouds fill, we have precipitation. Precipitation brings water down to the earth. Over time, the sun heats the earth's surface to cause evaporation, and you can see it's an ongoing cycle, which is why it's called the water cycle. And all of those changes are driven by the energy and heat from the sun. So let's backtrack for a second. So what we just talked about is that water is the only substance that exists in all three states of matter naturally. Water can be found as a solid in ice, as a flowing liquid, or in a gaseous vapor, and that's going to be steam. When water moves through the water cycle, it changes between these states of matter over and over again. And that just means it's going to continue to go through that cycle without an end. And that water cycle, like we said, is powered by the sun. So coming over to our notes, we've got the water cycle has no beginning and no end. When water moves through the water cycle, it changes between these states of matter over and over again. The water cycle is powered by heat energy from the sun. And so the sun is the major source of energy that moves water through the water cycle. And as you'll notice in your notes, now you have that same diagram we were looking at just a minute ago, where we can see those different stages taking place. So just to kind of keep this in the back of your minds, where is Earth's water? So we know Earth is primarily made of water, so where is all of that water found? And it's interesting to note that almost 97%, so almost all, thinking about out of 100%, almost 97% is in the oceans. About 1.7, which is kind of close to 2% of water, can be found in lakes, rivers, streams, and soil. We've got about 1.7% found in polar ice caps, so this is going to be frozen as solid water. So ice caps, glaciers, and permanent snow. And then 0.001%, so just a teeny tiny amount, is found in water vapor in the Earth's atmosphere. So like we already saw here, we've got the water cycle showing us a continuous process where the water is going to move from the air to the Earth's surface and back again to the air. So it's continually going through the cycle. As the heat shines down, we've got evaporation and transpiration. Water vapor collects as water droplets in the clouds. Once the clouds get full, we have precipitation sending the water back down to the Earth. And so we see those different states of matter taking place, those different states of water as matter taking place. So now we're going to talk about each of the different terms we saw in our diagram. So the first one is evaporation. Actually, let me go to the next one. We'll start with this one, since it's first on our list. The first one we'll talk about is transpiration, So transpiration and evaporation are similar in that it's water turning back into water vapor or gas, and transpiration is excess water evaporating from the leaves of plants and trees. And so this process is called transpiration. And so when it rains, the water collects in the ground in the soil. The water is absorbed by the roots of the plants. The water travels up into the leaves of the plant. And then finally, water vapor escapes from the leaves of the plant. So it's kind of like a type of evaporation where the water droplets that were consumed by the root of the plant and soaked up through the plant are now evaporating back into water vapor. So this first one we're writing down is transpiration. So plants release excess moisture as water vapor through their leaves. And you'll notice that all of these words end in ation, which is showing it's a process. Transpiration, evaporation, condensation, precipitation. These are all processes in the water cycle. So now we'll go back to this one, evaporation. So when surface water is heated by the sun, water molecules escape into the atmosphere as a gaseous water vapor. The process of changing from a liquid to a gas is called evaporation. So that's kind of the key, changing from a liquid to a gas. And so this could take place from puddles of water, lakes full of water, rivers full of water, and then we saw our largest water source on Earth is in our oceans. So our oceans also experience evaporation, where the heat from the sun causes the liquid water to change into gas or water vapor. So wherever water is heated by the sun, evaporation can occur. It occurs over oceans, lakes, rivers, puddles, soil, and even on your body. So this is interesting. Think about a time that you have sweated while exercising. Once the sweat dries on your skin, the reason it's drying is because the water in the sweat is evaporating into the air. And so after you have noticed you've stopped sweating and your skin is no longer wet, you might notice that you have salt left behind on your skin. And that's because the liquid water from your sweat has evaporated and it's just left behind the salt on your body. And that's similar to the oceans, where as the water from the oceans evaporates, the salt is left behind and just the water vapor evaporates into the atmosphere. So the next one is condensation. So you're wondering, where does that water vapor go that's evaporating from the water on the surface of the earth? So warm air is going to carry the water vapor up to the atmosphere. So as water evaporates, becomes water vapor, it's evaporating into the air, it's going to be carried up into the upper atmosphere, and it's going to cool and form very small droplets of liquid water. And so the process through which water vapor changes back into liquid water is called condensation. So you'll notice it's changing from water vapor to liquid water, so cooling is occurring, and it's changing the state from gas back to liquid. And so that is going to be condensation. Condensation is changing a gas back to a liquid, and it's happening when cool temperatures are added, when cooling is added. So you might have noticed condensation, therefore, would be the opposite of evaporation, because instead of going from a liquid to a gas, it's turning the gas back into a liquid. And so these tiny droplets of water that are condensating collect together, and it forms a cloud. So if you've ever wondered what a cloud is made up of, it's going to be tiny water droplets that come from water evaporating from the Earth's surface. They turn back into liquid water, come together, and form clouds. So I'll add that here, condensation. Warm air carries water vapor to the upper atmosphere where it cools down. So the cooling makes small droplets of liquid water, changing the water vapor back into liquid water. That's condensation. The last one we have here is precipitation. And remember, precipitation can occur in different forms. So we've got snow is a type of precipitation, freezing rain, hail, and then just regular rain. And again, that's going to depend on the air temperature. So precipitation is when those water droplets that have formed clouds get large enough, they start to fall to the ground as a form of precipitation. So rain, hail, sleet, or snow. So again, thinking about the previous one, the water vapor is going back into the atmosphere. It's cooling, becoming tiny little water droplets. As water droplets form clouds, well, when the clouds get too full and the water droplets get large enough, they start to fall back down in the form of precipitation. And it depends on the temperature of the air around it to determine whether it's going to be snow as your precipitation or just regular rain as your precipitation. So the last process here we're adding is precipitation. And again, that's when your water droplets get large enough and they fall back down to the ground as a form of precipitation. And again, just as a review, keeping in mind that the power behind the water cycle, the fact that the water is changing different states of matter into different states of matter, comes from the heat from the sun. So the surface of the earth gets heated by the sun, which starts the evaporation. Evaporation leads into condensation. Condensation takes us into precipitation, and the cycle starts back over with evaporation and transpiration. So again, the power of the heat from the sun really keeps our water cycle moving, a constant, continuous rate. And here's one more image of it, just a different diagram, but same idea. We've got water evaporating and transpiring from the trees and from the ground. We've got condensation, the water vapor collecting as water droplets in the clouds. Once the clouds fill up and the water droplets become large enough, we have precipitation. And there's one more term added here, runoff, and that's just meant to represent water doesn't only, when we have snow or rain, it doesn't only just automatically go into the ocean, but rather it goes to the ground, whatever your surface is, and the water will eventually run off into a stream or a pond or a lake. So if you notice outside, we might have puddles right after a rainstorm, but eventually those puddles are absorbed, and that water is traveling to a larger water source, whether it's a stream or a pond or an ocean. So you have the runoff as well. So that's where we'll stop for today with your notes. So at this time, you can go ahead and continue on in your Nearpod.